Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. We are back here with Randy Swaim. I'm excited to have him here. Look at my aviation friend here. Yeah, he's a Marshall Goldsmith certified coach. We used to talk a long time ago, and today we get to do that again. He's an amazing coach. We're going to talk again about coachingforrelevance.com. That's his company. Let me have him introduce himself because you've been away from our listenership here in the studio. Please say hello.
Hello. It's great to be with you. I know we've chatted along the way, some time ago. Good to be with you again. And but I'm Randy Swaim, Marshall Goldsmith Certified Executive Coach, like you said. And I will just simply say that with a lot of my background has been in not in various aspects of leadership, but very tied to aviation and piloting and all that. And I tell people I know what it's like to live your dreams. So so it's that's who you got today.
Fantastic. Well, we're excited to have you here. So your executive coaching company and organization, would you mind just giving us a little overview of the type of work you do? I think it's important for us to share that, and then we'll get into specifics today because I'm behind on where you've been talking about on your podcast.
That's okay. You bet. Well, it's an honor to be with you and connecting with you here again. And but yeah, it's executive coaching. My passion is not just me. It's about making a difference in other people. And one of the things that I tell people is my whole vision of what I do, whether it's training and certifying pilots, jet pilots, or whether it's coaching business leaders, which I've done, or coaching youth, in the Rising Stars process. My passion is that that I help them overcome the things that are holding them back. My vision for my company really is bringing freedom to potential and all those across my path. And I say when you put that in aviation terminology, it's this aspect of helping people overcome the gravitational forces that are holding them back from soaring to their altitude. And I've said this, the listeners have probably heard this before. I've said this, and KC loves it kind of when he hears it. But what I tell people is that I don't care if 20 years after I take my last breath that people don't remember my name, but what I want is that people will remember there was this guy 20 years ago. Boy, he brought out an insight, and man, I'll tell you what, it changed my life, kind of thing. And that's a picture of what I'm all about. And you may know, Jill, that the recording team just came in about a week and a half ago, and they're recording a 78-minute television documentary of my life journey and coaching and all that. And it's going to be published probably the first of next year. And what is amazing is that's kind of how I finish it. That's my whole vision. It's not about me. It's not about just that. It's about what that impact may have in other people. Not because I've told them anything specific. Some of it may just be just something they experienced, but that they get something that they perceived, that they apply to their life, and it made a huge difference. And if I only do that to 100 people in my life, each one of them may do it to 3 or 4 other people. And then each one of those people will do it to maybe 3 or 4 other people. So who knows the impact? And
Absolutely.
so that's my passion. That's my vision. That's what I'm all about.
Well, we're excited to have you here. And what's the inspiration for today's podcast? What did you have in mind specifically? What are you sharing with us today?
Well, I'll share something that's actually a current situation, and the listeners may remember me saying this before, but it dovetails into some leadership and the value of coaching. And KC knows this, and you may know this, Jill, I don't know, but last spring in April, I was brought on as a founding fellowship partner for the Institute for Organizational Neuroscience in Europe.
Wow.
And so neuroscience is a key thing in coaching. How do you really connect with people in your leadership role that helps people get a sense of how they process it, how they apply it, how they visualize it, how they envision it. It's not just going through rote academic things. And this is just sort of a picture of that. But I've shared with KC this aspect that when you're talking about making decisions in a situation, you particularly as a leader, you cannot just go to the rote superficial content of what a situation appears to be. What you have to do is go deeper than that and sense the context of it, of what are all the factors. And I thought I'd just share one example from the aviation background that is actually fairly current, that that I think fits a lot of that, and it dovetails into strategic vision, strategic planning, and decision making, and things of that nature.
Got it. Well, also, you've been doing this quite some time, right? And let me just ask you, for listeners out there that are looking to be coached, it's not just individuals you're working with corporations, businesses, you're doing speaking, you're out and about. I mean, just curious, right? You do work with, mostly at this point, are you doing one-on-ones? Are you doing businesses? Are you doing?
Well, the short answer to the question, that I hate to put it to you this way, but it sort of depends. And the reason I say that is a lot of it is one-on-one. And most of the coaching that I do has been to one-on-one business leaders and team leaders, but I also bring a coaching approach and coaching awareness and neuroscience awareness to how I interact with flight crews and pilots that are piloting jets out there. And when I'm training or developing a pilot, guess what? Part of that is using a coaching facilitative style. So as I tell people, and this actually really dovetails and sets the stage for this topic today, but it really sets the stage for how that pilot, once they leave you, they can go out and guess what? On that next flight, the way I put it is Murphy may come on stage, Murphy's Law, the idea that whatever can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible time, and have people truly been developed to be able to make the right decisions at the point of attack if that happens. And so guess what? It's that coaching facilitative style of training. I had one instructor tell me, I think this happened about maybe 6 months ago. They said, well, I know everybody says we need to go to a more coaching style, but you don't have time to do that. And I looked at this person, I said, you know why that is? And they said, why? And I said, because you don't understand the right questions to ask.
Wow.
I said, if you understand the right questions, and this goes to the meat of this concept of not just going to superficial content, but going to the true context of the situation and of the decision making and all of that. And that's what I told them. And I said, you don't understand the right questions to ask. I said, if you understand the right questions, they will receive the coaching perspective on it, and they will do what a coach wants them to do in terms of really getting that sense of growth there. And so just some things to think about on that. And I'll just share this with you, and then you can kind of interact in any way you want to, Jill. But it's one of the big things that you see. It's one of the current things when you think about strategic planning, and particularly in relating to aviation. One of the things that you see out there, there's actually some articles that are posted where a lot of the aviation companies out there, airlines and people like that around the world, are really looking to try to move to one pilot airplanes. So you don't have a pilot and co-pilot anymore. They're looking at possibly how to go do that. And there's some articles out there where people are trying to get the FAA to design a way to do that, and in all of that. And part of the reason for that in strategic planning, guess what? It's realistic stress that they're feeling because of the cost that is there. And in terms of trying to reduce the cost, they're looking at reducing the people. And the challenge on that, and this is kind of one of the things that I've actually communicated very recently, it's one of the big stresses on that. Those people are looking at it from a very superficial standpoint, and there's an assumption that they're making is that the automation that exists in cockpits now is so much that you don't need two pilots. Well, really? the thing is, they are making some assumptions that are deeper in the context. And the issue is, and I just throw out a couple of examples for just awareness of a picture of it. But what happens when all the electrics in the airplane goes out? What happens when something happens that causes all the navigation components to die or to whatever? What kind of, can the pilot handle that decision? Can they make the right choices if that were to happen? But the other part of it is this too. Are they trained to be able to not just depend on automation?
Yeah.
Are they trained to be able to process and decide and choose? And in one sense, automation is not something in any industry.
That.
Automation is not something you should just be depending on. It's something that you know what needs to be done, and you're aware that the automation is doing what you know it needs to do, rather than just waiting on it to fail and then going, oh golly, what do I do now? And so that's a key part of it. But the other part of this too is, and this is what a lot of people forget, because I had to I had to go through physiological training in the Air Force a lot every 3 years, because in the military you had to do that. But very few civilian pilots have had to do that and have gone through it at all. But the thing is, what happens if that single pilot has a heart attack unexpectedly? And
Wow.
there's no other pilot in the cockpit? What happens if that pilot is starting to experience hypoxic symptoms within their self that they're not aware of? One of the questions I kind of relate to pilots that I'm working with is, it's one thing to know your own hypoxic symptoms. I know mine because of going through physiological training and experiencing it. But can you experience hypoxia in the other pilot or in
Hmm.
the flight attendant? What do you look for? One of the things that I look for is truncated sentences or verbal pauses. If you hear somebody going, you know what, I think we should, um, you know what, it could be their processing is slowing down, and that could be hypoxia. And
Wow.
the aspects of it that I mentioned to people is, if there's only one pilot in the crew, nobody else, and the flight attendant is taking care of the passengers back there, not in the cockpit.
Yeah.
If you are getting hypoxia unaware, who's going to know that? And how do you really make safety happen in that? So my point is, when you talk about the context, the true context, rather than just the superficial academic content of what you want to think, if you understand the context of it, there's other factors that very often people don't understand. And I think if the industry wanted to move in that direction, there's a lot about training that has to kind of change. And in one aspect, that's why my doctorate work, PhD work, is going in that direction.
Interesting.
How instructors at a professional level need to rethink and reapply what they're doing, so that these kind of things, people are developed. So it's very interesting when you kind of wrap that aspect into leading your team in an unpredictable, challenging environment, where, guess what, nothing is always going to be purely academic. How are you going to lead your team in a way so that even when you're not there, they can make the right decision? And
Wow.
and it brings out a whole new picture in terms of leadership. It brings out a whole new picture of modeling for your team. Are you doing it so that they can experience the benefit of it in such a way that they adopt it within themselves without you having to kind of dictate to them, kind of thing? And so there's all sorts of aspects like that. But this aspect of a lot of kind of what's being talked about in the aviation community right now is one example of that for leading teams in any arena. What point are you just gravitating back to rote academic thoughts? And
Hmm.
to what extent are you making excuses if it doesn't work out just the way you wanted it to, or that you thought it should have, kind of thing? And that's unfortunately something that's very common in a lot of areas of our industries and our society and all that. And so it's just, when you're talking about that in terms of leading your teams, and an awareness of how the brain works and how you develop the ability for your team to bring out miraculous and radical results and maximize safety and success and minimize risk, even when a challenging situation that was the last thing you expected comes on scene. And so it's just, there's a lot of examples of that picture when you're talking about leading your team in any arena, in any environment, in any industry. Because guess what? It's one of the areas that, Jill, I think you know, because I mentioned it before, my organizational maneuverability context, the idea that, guess what? It takes pilot lessons and applies them to leading teams in a rapidly changing, unpredictable, environment. And guess what? That's our world right now. That's our business world. And
Wow.
if you're just going to what you learned 40 years ago, guess what? That may not be as effective right now. And so it's just, there's these different aspects, and that's just one picture of an sort of an analogous picture from aviation of what leaders need to think about when you're talking about connecting with and leading your team in the environment that you're in. So it's just kind of an image, an analogy, if you will, of that aspect of really focusing it on context and not just the superficial content, but also how are you really thinking in terms of your strategic planning, and in your strategic thinking, and how are you modeling that and building that and leading that in your team. And so there's a lot of aspects like that, guess what, in a challenging business world, which today is, guess what, those are some of the factors that a leader has to be aware of.
Got it. Well, also at this time, would you mind reminding our listeners the best form and all forms of contact?
You bet. Well, it's my name is obviously Randy Swaim, as you said correctly. So, as I jokingly say, just don't call me late for dinner. But there's Randy Swaim, an executive coach. You could go to my website for sure. It's coachingforrelevance.com, and
Yes.
or you can also and if you go there, at the bottom of the homepage, there's my phone number's on there and my email. As I tell people, and I think you've heard me say this before, Jill, that my you don't have to worry about me doing cold, sales pitches to you. I mean, if somebody calls me and they have a need of something, well, we work something out, you bet. But I'm not a person that does, hard cold call sales kind of thing. I build relationships,
Got it.
and so they don't have to worry about that. If they just want to have a conversation, that's cool. If they have a need for a coach, you know what? Yeah, we'll come up with something. No two ways about it. And we can do that too. But
And you used to do the rising star.
yeah,
Was that we talked, what was the Rising Stars? Can you remind me program?
yeah, sure. You bet. The Rising Stars, if you can envision, and this is one thing that KC loves also, but if you can envision an executive leadership development process that's pared down to where 12 to 16-year-olds could understand it, that's the Rising Stars process. And in fact, you may have heard me say this before. I don't know. I've shared with KC on the show one time before for sure. And but one of the more amazing questions I've gotten out of a Rising Stars group, I was actually coaching, 5 young people. The youngest one was 9 years old. The oldest one in this group was like 12 to 13. And sometimes girls get real nervous, sometimes when they need to ask a question, particularly when they're very young like that. And this one girl we were talking about legacy and impact and all that kind of stuff. And she asked me this question. She goes, I got a question. And I said, okay, what's your question? And she goes, and she looked at me and she goes, do you have to be alive to have impact? And most people in today's world would just say, no, you don't, Well, I didn't do that. What I did is I, first of all, highly complimented her. I said, young lady, you have my compliments for that question. You're awesome. And I went to the rest of the class. I said, what do you guys think? And one 12-year-old girl, her younger brother had passed away about a year and a half prior to that for some physical things. I don't remember. And I said, don't share anything you don't want to, but how do you perceive him? How do you experience him today? And she talked about how much she thought of him and how much she still loves him and all of this kind of stuff. And I looked back at the 9-year-old girl. I said, so what's the answer to your question? And she was actually leaning forward like this. And she looked at me and she kind of shook her head. She goes, no, you don't have to be. And I went, there you go. And I said, there you go, kind of thing. But it's a key point. But the Rising Stars is a process that is if you can envision, it's a program that has actually been created and developed by a group that I'm a part of, which is called Trusted Advisors Network. Been with them since 2010, so almost 13 years now, kind of thing. But they have, but they created it, and I love it because it's you can imagine an executive leadership coaching development course that's with a coaching mindset, and yet it's pared down to where 12 to 16-year-olds could get some insight from it. That's the Rising Stars process, and I just appreciate even what I've seen with the young kids. So no two ways about that.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. I remember because it's been a while. If you're just tuning in, Randy and I used to talk a long time ago. So
it's been an honor,
know him and coaching for relevance again. It's becoming more relevant again, the work he does.
There you go.
Which is great, but wonderful. We still have a few minutes left in our show. What else did you want to share with us? So, Randy, we have 5 minutes left.
Okay. Well, I think that's just it, and so often the big thing that I would just kind of share is, from a coach and from a leader in ways that leadership has developed in me through my journey and all that. One of the things that I would just tell people, I would just ask them a couple of questions. And one of which is, at what point have you felt like you missed the boat sometimes? What do you need to do? What caused that? What didn't you see? What came to you after that? And how does that need to adapt how you do what you do in leading your teams, or, maybe leading your rising stars, your kids or whatever, kind of thing. And I mean, that could be a whole hour topic itself, kind of thing. But the bottom line is, as you look at your journey, and don't play the blame game, look at what you needed to do differently to make things more successful at times. And I've done that a lot in my life. And just, here's what I need to do a little bit different there. And you know what? I'll take that to heart, and I'll kind of look at that and align it and process it and apply it. And it's made a difference. And but also, what do you need to do? How are you kind of putting leadership abilities aside and just becoming a dictatorial manager? And how is that impacting in a negative way your team? How's that putting them in a place where they can't perform as well in a way that really represents everybody? So there's a lot of things that we can all look at that. And you know what? I jokingly tell people, I've had people ask me when I'm going to retire, and I say when I take my last breath, because I tell them I'm going to run through the tape. And you know what? True leaders, you've heard this you've seen this posted on social media from time to time by different people, but true leaders never stop learning. Yeah. And for me, I'm going to run through the tape. Beautiful. And when you're talking about a person, that's what I recommend for all of us to adopt. Right. Run through the tape and keep learning all the way through the tape.
And keep pushing through. Thank you, Randy Swaim. Remind us how we can reach you again. Thank you.
Okay. And it's been an honor to sit with you again. This time we'll have to do it again. But yeah, they're Randy Swaim, executive coach, Marshall Goldsmith, executive coach. You can go to my website of coachingforrelevance.com. You can connect with me and join together on social media, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, all of that.
Beautiful.
And you can call or email me, and definitely I'm open to just having a conversation sometime if somebody would like to.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to see you and work with you. Hope you have a great holiday if we don't speak again. And thank you again for being here. And to all of you, stay tuned.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.